The woods are often described as a place of peace, where the world's noise fades away, replaced by the quiet rustling of leaves and the distant songs of birds. But those who have truly spent time in the wilderness know that the forest can also feel unnervingly alive, as though it has its own secrets, watching and waiting for anyone who dares to wander too deep. One of the most disturbing discoveries ever reported came from a group of hikers in Oregon. They were experienced explorers, used to camping and navigating in remote places, but nothing could have prepared them for what they stumbled across. It was early morning, the ground still wet with dew, when one of them spotted a dark shape wedged between two moss-covered boulders. At first, they thought it was just trash left behind by careless campers, but as they came closer, they realized it was an old, battered suitcase. The fabric was torn in places, the handle half broken, and the zipper rusted from years of exposure to damp air. Curiosity got the better of them. After a short struggle, one of the hikers yanked it open. A foul, moldy smell escaped, and they all instinctively stepped back. Inside, however, wasn't what they had expected. There were no clothes, no camping supplies, no ordinary belongings. Instead, the suitcase was stuffed full of old Polaroid photographs. At first glance, the photos looked like typical snapshots, until the hikers realized what they were really seeing. Each image showed people in the woods, bound tightly to trees with ropes or tape. Their faces were frozen in expressions of terror, eyes wide, mouths gagged. Some looked young, others older, but all of them carried the same look of fear. The hikers were horrified. They rifled through dozens of photos, each more disturbing than the last, and quickly realized that none of them showed any signs of rescue or release. Whoever had taken those pictures had left these people to their fate, or worse. The group argued about what to do. Some wanted to leave the suitcase right there and walk away, pretending they had never seen it. Others insisted on reporting it to the authorities. Eventually, they carried it out of the woods and turned it over to the police. Investigators were baffled. The images were genuine, not staged. But the people in the photographs were never identified, and no missing persons cases matched the faces. The suitcase was sealed away as evidence, and the case remains unsolved to this day. But Oregon's woods weren't the only place where something horrifying was uncovered. In a deep stretch of forest in Canada, a lone camper reported an experience that still haunts him years later. He had pitched his tent far from the beaten trail, seeking solitude. On his second night, as the fire burned low, he heard what he swore was the sound of a child crying somewhere in the distance. At first, he thought it must have been a trick of the wind. But the sound came again, faint, heart-wrenching, like a small child sobbing. Against his better judgment, he grabbed a flashlight and followed the noise. The deeper he went, the louder it grew, until finally he emerged into a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood something completely out of place, a small wooden crib, weathered and decayed, its paint peeling away after years of exposure to the elements. The sight made his skin crawl. He approached slowly and saw that inside the crib was a thin mattress covered with rotting, stained sheets. The marks looked disturbingly like dried blood. As he backed away, the crying sound suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was even worse than the cries had been. He returned to his camp, shaken and unable to sleep. The next night, the crying returned. This time, it came from just outside his tent, circling around him. He packed up his gear in the dead of night and fled the forest without looking back. Even after he reached safety, he claimed the cries followed him in his dreams for weeks. What's most disturbing is that others who have camped in that region of the forest have reported the same eerie sound of a child crying, though no one has ever found any trace of a missing child. The crib, too, was said to disappear and reappear in different parts of the woods, as if the forest itself was shifting it around. These two stories alone would be enough to make anyone think twice about wandering off the trail. Yet they are only the beginning of the chilling discoveries that have been made in the depths of the woods, reminders that not all secrets of the forest are meant to be uncovered. Hunters are used to seeing strange things in the wilderness. They spend long hours in the quiet, sometimes days away from civilization, and stumble upon sights most people never will. But some discoveries are so unnerving they become etched into memory forever. One of the most disturbing came from Alabama. A group of hunters were tracking deer when one of them noticed something odd in the distance, a structure hidden behind a thick wall of trees. It looked old, almost swallowed by the forest, with ivy creeping up its wooden walls. As they got closer, they realized it was a small cabin. None of them had ever seen it before, and it didn't appear on any maps. The hunters were curious but cautious. The cabin looked abandoned, its windows broken and its roof sagging with rot. Yet there was something unsettling about the air around it. A foul smell lingered, sharp and metallic, like rust or blood. Against their better instincts, they pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was dark, the air thick with dust and that overpowering stench. Their flashlights swept across the walls, and what they saw made their stomachs turn. Shelves lined every wall, and on each shelf sat dozens of glass jars. Inside the jars floated organs, carefully preserved in cloudy liquid. At first, they assumed these were animal parts, hearts, livers, eyes. But when one of the hunters shined his light on a large jar in the corner, his breath caught in his throat. The contents didn't look animal at all. The shape was disturbingly human. Some said it looked like a small hand, shriveled but unmistakably human. Another jar seemed to hold something resembling a fetus. The hunters backed out immediately, shaken to the core. They reported their find, and local authorities investigated. When the site was examined, the jars were indeed real, but officials never confirmed exactly what was inside them. The case was quietly closed, with a vague statement that the cabin was unsafe and unsuitable for visitors. The land was sealed off, and to this day, no one knows who had lived there or why they had been collecting such grotesque specimens. Locals whisper that it had been used by a reclusive hermit or perhaps by someone dabbling in occult rituals. Others believe it was evidence of something far worse, someone experimenting on both animals and humans. That wasn't the only horrifying discovery buried in forest silence. In Montana, a ranger patrolling the edge of a national park found something even stranger. It began with a scattering of bones across the forest floor. At first, he assumed they belonged to deer, elk, or maybe even wolves. But the more he looked, the more unsettled he became. The bones weren't just scattered randomly, they seemed to form a loose trail, leading deeper into the woods. Intrigued and alarmed, the ranger followed. Along the way, he saw fragments of vertebrae, animal skulls, and rib cages, all bleached white with age. Yet it wasn't until he spotted a jawbone that he froze. This one wasn't animal, it was human. The jawbone still had several teeth intact, yellowed and cracked but unmistakably human. The ranger radioed in for backup but continued to follow the trail. Eventually, he came to a massive hollow tree, its trunk split wide enough for someone to step inside. When he peered into the dark cavity, his blood ran cold. The hollow was packed with bones. Some were animal, deer antlers, bear skulls, even smaller creatures like raccoons. But mixed among them were bones that could only be human, femurs, ribs, and what looked like fragments of a skull. It was as if someone had been deliberately collecting and storing them inside the tree, like some kind of macabre cabinet. When authorities arrived, they documented the site, but no definitive answers were ever given. Who had gathered the bones? Were they remnants of forgotten burials, or had someone been killing and hiding victims there? The tree was eventually sealed, and the area restricted from hikers. Officially, the case was labeled inconclusive. Unofficially, rangers whispered warnings not to follow bone trails if you ever came across them. What chills most people about these stories is the deliberate nature of the discoveries. The jars in the cabin weren't random, they had been carefully preserved. The bones in the tree weren't scattered by animals, they had been placed there by someone with intent. That's what makes these finds so terrifying. They suggest not accidents, but a person, someone with dark purposes, had been there before, working in silence beneath the cover of the woods. Even now, hunters and rangers tell stories of stumbling across places in the forest where the silence feels heavier than usual, as if the trees themselves are holding back secrets they don't want revealed. And maybe, just maybe, some secrets are never meant to be uncovered. The most unsettling discoveries in the woods are not always old, forgotten relics of the past. Sometimes, what's found suggests that something, or someone, is still out there, watching, waiting, and perhaps ready to return. These encounters stay with those who experience them, haunting their nights long after they've left the safety of the forest. In Russia's dense Ural forests, a group of explorers came across something so bizarre it left them shaken to their core. They had been hiking for days, mapping trails that were rarely traveled, when they stepped into a small clearing. At first, they thought it was just another natural opening in the trees, but then their eyes adjusted, and they realized the clearing wasn't natural at all. Around its edge, nailed to the trunks of surrounding trees, were dolls. Each doll was weathered by the elements, their plastic limbs cracked, their clothes faded and torn. But the most disturbing detail was their faces. Every doll's eyes had been gouged out, leaving only hollow sockets. They weren't placed randomly either, they had been arranged in a perfect circle, all facing inward toward the center of the clearing. And in that center, there was evidence of a fire pit. Charred wood and blackened stones suggested that someone had been using the space for gatherings, perhaps rituals. The explorers didn't stay long. They felt watched, as though the empty sockets of those dolls were still following them. Locals later claimed the clearing was linked to cult activity, but no cult was ever proven to exist. Others whispered that the dolls weren't placed by people at all, that the forest itself had a way of drawing in those who passed through, twisting objects into symbols of something much darker. But Russia isn't the only place where such things are found. In the forests of Maine, another discovery left a lone hiker deeply disturbed. He had been hiking alone, enjoying the solitude, when he spotted something reflective among the trees. At first, he thought it might be trash, perhaps a discarded piece of metal catching the sunlight. As he got closer, he realized it wasn't trash at all, it was a mirror. The mirror was tall, almost human-sized, and propped upright against the trunk of a tree. Its surface was surprisingly clean, as though someone had been maintaining it despite its bizarre location. But what made the scene chilling was what surrounded it. Arranged in a wide circle around the mirror were dozens of animal skulls. They weren't just scattered randomly, they were positioned carefully, all facing inward toward the reflective glass, like an audience staring into the mirror. The hiker felt a wave of unease wash over him. Something about the arrangement felt purposeful, ritualistic. Still, curiosity urged him forward. He stepped closer and glanced at his own reflection. For a moment, everything seemed normal, until he noticed something strange. His reflection wasn't moving quite right. When he raised his hand, the reflection hesitated, as though lagging behind. When he blinked, the reflection's eyes remained open a split second too long. And then, he swore he saw it. His reflection's mouth curled into a smile, even though his own lips hadn't moved at all. Panicking, he tried to push the mirror over, hoping to break it. But as he gripped the frame, he heard it, the sound of footsteps rushing through the underbrush behind him. They were fast, heavy, closing in. He spun around, but no one was there. When he turned back, the reflection was still smiling. Terrified, he fled, never daring to return. Even later, when he told the story, he admitted he wasn't sure if what he saw was real or just his mind playing tricks on him. But one detail remained, the feeling that the mirror hadn't been abandoned. Someone, or something, had placed it there, waiting for people like him to find it. These kinds of discoveries hint at a terrifying truth: not everything found in the woods can be explained away as coincidence, neglect, or even human cruelty. Some things feel deliberate, staged, designed to frighten those who stumble upon them, or to send a message that the forest is not theirs to claim. Those who walk away from such discoveries often carry something with them, a sense that they were intruders, trespassing on ground that belonged to forces beyond their understanding. The woods hold secrets, and while many go seeking peace, others find themselves staring into the darkest corners of human, and perhaps non-human, intent. It is this lingering uncertainty that makes the woods so frightening, because when the trees close in around you and the silence becomes heavy, you can never be sure what lies ahead. And if you happen to find a circle of dolls, a hollowed tree stuffed with bones, or a mirror surrounded by skulls, one question will always echo in your mind: who put it there, and why? Sometimes, the most disturbing part of the forest isn't what you see, it's knowing that something out there wanted you to see it.